So the first program we're going to use today is called GIMP. And it's a kind of open source alternative to Photoshop. It's not as powerful and as feature rich as Photoshop is. Actually, you can get, if you're an old Photoshop user, you could get something that is called GIMP Shop. Since GIMP is open source, it's easy to modify it. And so they made one version of GIMP that looks exactly the same like Photoshop, and all the shortcuts are also the same than in Photoshop. So I don't really recommend this, but well, if you're really a Photoshop addict and you already know all the shortcuts, then you might think about something like GIMP Shop. Then GIMP already has lots of add-ons. And actually, for making it very nice, you would install some additional brushes. So it comes with like maybe 20 brushes, but if you go to the GIMP plugin repository or for the GIMP extension pack, you can install a bunch of material that will increase your GIMP experience, or how do you say make it a bit nicer. But for the moment, all we need is a regular installation of GIMP. Okay, so the first thing I want to do in Inkscape is I go to Windows and check the single window mode. Modo de schnelle única. It's one thing that many people complained about in GIMP, because GIMP usually has every window separate. So you could have your toolbar on one side and your layers on the other and your drawing area somewhere in the middle, and they just float on the desktop, which is kind of handy if you want to, for example, take a color sample from your desktop picture. You could just work on your whole working area. But some people find it terribly annoying, and so I recommend you to use the single window mode. And you will see that there's that you have a toolbar to the left, which has all the drawing tools, and then you have these panels. So this is one panel. I could drag it and put it somewhere else, and those are also panels, and we can freely rearrange them and add tabs to them or remove them. But for the moment, I think it's quite okay the way it is, but have in mind that this is fully customizable. Then right now I have several pictures open, so I see some tabs on top. And I'm going to make a new image. And in the template, I will choose one of 1024 by 768. And by default, it just makes a white canvas. Or in this case, my background color. You could also choose to have a transparent or a white background. But actually, we don't really care. We just say OK. Okay, so basically what we're presented with is a very simple drawing program. So what people usually do in drawing programs is drawing. So you pick a brush, which is this one. And then you can choose between several different brush types. I will just take this one. And you can also see that there's a circle around your cursor that is the size of the brush. And if you go here to Tool Options, you can adjust the size and a few other options. For the moment, we only care about the size. And I make mine a little bit bigger. And I can change the color here in this little spot. So there's two fields. One is the background color and one is the foreground color. And you can quickly switch between those by clicking the little arrow button. And if I click on the color itself, I can choose a color from the rainbow. And this is going to be my foreground color, which is the one that the brush paints with. So GIMP is all about pixels. So if you hold Control and rotate your mouse wheel, you can zoom in. And if you hold the middle mouse button pressed and drag it, you can pan. So Command on Mac, or I think on Windows it's Alt, right? Okay, so on Windows it's Control and rotating the mouse wheel, and on Mac it's Command and rotating the mouse wheel. And you should be able to zoom in until you see all the single pixels. And if you just use the middle mouse button and click it and drag, you can move the canvas. In Photoshop, you would do it with the space button, but here it's the middle mouse button. And so we see that we have all little pixels. Each pixel has just one color, and each pixel or each color is defined by 3 values for red, green, and blue. And if I click on this little tool, it will tell me the color of this pixel. Yeah, right now I can see my foreground color changing depending on which color I click on. This color, I can see the values in 2 different formats. So the first one, the HSV, this is one way of defining a color. It's hue, saturation, and value. And the next 3, the RGB, is the red, green, and blue value. And each one of those is completely sufficient for describing a color. And I think I can also move to, here you can see it in cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And there's different ways of choosing your colors. So you can see that if I put everything on 0, I get black, 0, 0, 0. And if I put everything on 255, I get white. 2 to the power of 8 is 256. So we're talking about 8-bit colors, because each of our 3 color values has 8 bits to store the value. And in 8 bits, where each one can be either 1 or 0, you can store 256 different values. And since we go from 0, and then we have 256 values, we end up at 255. So this is the color range that we're moving in. You could calculate how many different colors this would give you, and it's a few million. It's a lot. And so for a bitmap, in order to store it, you have to have the dimensions of our picture. So if I go to, I cancel this one, if I go to image and scale image, I know it's 1024 times 768. This gives me the number of pixels. And then I have to multiply it by 8 3 times, because this is the amount of colors we have. And this will give me the file size of the image. Each pixel needs 24 bits for storing one color. And this times the pixels we have in the image gives me the file size. We could do a quick calculation, but here it tells me that it's 8.9 megabytes, and it would probably make sense. So this is talking about a bitmap with no transparency. Right now, we don't have any transparency in our image. If we want to have transparency as well, we need to add another channel. Right now, we have 3 channels. If you click on this one where it says channels, you can see that we have the red, the green, and the blue channel. And if you want to have transparency, we're not talking about RGB, but we're talking about RGBA. So we add another 8-bit value that defines the amount of transparency we have in our image. So if I right-click on the image and I say add alpha channel, okay, so once I click on add alpha channel and I go back to the channels, I will see that now I have the red, green, blue, and an alpha channel. And this means that my picture is going to be bigger because I have to store more information on it. So we just increased our image size by a little bit. Now it's 11 megabytes. It was 8.9 before. So just by adding the alpha channel, we increase the image size, but we have another dimension. Instead of 3 dimensions, we have 4 dimensions now. So just for giving you some general information on how bitmaps work. So if I go to export as, I can choose from several different formats to export my image in. And I will lose a moment for talking about a few of them. So here we have a GIF image. A GIF image is a bitmap that has an alpha channel, but the alpha channel doesn't have 255 values, it just has 2 values. It can either be completely transparent or completely opaque. This is why when you have GIF images somewhere, they always look a bit edgy. They have like all these zigzaggy corners around them. The advantage of a GIF image is that it can also store many layers. And you can tell the layers to reproduce in order, so you can make an animation. I think we will do one later, just for the fun of it. Last year it was really popular. Many of my students, they just took many photos and then they assembled them to an animation. So you have like little GIFs that like show you what's going on. Instead of putting a video, you just put an animated GIF. It's quite neat. And GIMP allows you to do animations. All you have to do is give your layers a certain name. And you can also put the duration time that each layer is going to show in milliseconds behind it in parentheses. So you can make little animations. Yeah. And then we have a few GIMP brushes and GIMP patterns. Then JPEG. And JPEG, I think we shortly talked about this. JPEG is a compressed image format which loses information. So if you have a bitmap with your amount of pixels and amount of colors, and you save it as a JPEG, the JPEG will look at certain effects of our human vision system, and it will recognize that actually there's a lot of information we can get rid of without really noticing any visible change. But this way you lose information. Once you save it as JPEG, you can never go back. But if you save it as a JPEG with 100% compression, then it would kind of stay the same, but you never ever want to save a JPEG with 100% compression because it's just stupid. Like, why would you use a compressed format and then not compress it? Oh, I went to File, Export Image, and then I just clicked onto the, I clicked here onto the Export Image Files, and then this gives me the whole list of formats that GIMP can understand. And it does a lot of formats, so it's very nice for converting from one program to the other. Then we have the .ico files. And I think some of you already stumbled upon those while we were doing the website. So each website has a little icon in the up here. Can you see the little icon from Google? It looks like a letter. And all of those, you see on my websites, they have a little icon in front. This is a so-called ICO image. I have no probably icon. I don't know. It has some special properties. It also can have animations, and I think it's mostly very compressed. Not all programs can make ICO files. I'm not sure if Photoshop can. Yeah. So GIMP, in contrast to Photoshop, can make and save ICO files, which is great if you want to put an icon on your desktop or on your website. Then we can actually open and save as Photoshop files. So if you save a GIMP file as PSD, you will be able to open it in Photoshop, conserving all your layers and all your selections, which is quite nice. Then, of course, we have PDF. And PDF is not just it's not a bitmap. It's not a purely bitmap format, but it's a mixture between vector graphics and bitmaps. But we will come to this in a moment. PostScript is a vector format. Then we have raw image data. So if you have a camera that is able to take photos where it saves directly the information from your image sensor, it would be a raw format. So it's not compressed. It's not in any special type of format. It's just raw pixels. This would be the one to choose. And then we have TIFF. TIFF is a nice format. It comes, and it's in its native style. It's uncompressed. So you can take all the information, including the alpha channel. And there's ways of lossless compression for TIFF. So you can apply something like a zip in the graphics world. Many people use a compression program that is called bzip or gzip. So you can make a TIFF image that already is compressed in a lossless compression. So you don't lose disk space, but you lose processor power, because decompressing the image takes compressor power. So if you compress an image lossless, very hard, it's going to take longer to open than an uncompressed image. Then we have Targa or TGA, which is also a very nice format. It also has an alpha channel. It can also come in lossless compression. Yeah, so if you painted something beautiful and you want to save it so that it will always be in full quality, choose TIFF or Targa. And if you have a picture that doesn't have any transparency, you could use bitmap as well. Bitmap is kind of an old school Windows format that doesn't have any compression and it doesn't have an alpha channel. So you're kind of limited to what you would get doing a screenshot. That's it. Yep. And then we have a few others, but yeah, I think this is okay for the moment. There's also another few hints I want to give you. If you go to image mode, you can see that I have RGB, grayscale, and indexed. So there's a few image formats that can save more information than just the color of each pixel, or so to say, they allow you to save space by reducing the color palette. So for example, if I take a grayscale image, so right now I have 11 megabytes. If I switch to grayscale, suddenly my image is only, oh, now it disappeared. Well, it doesn't really matter, but it's going to be smaller. And I can also choose indexed. And GIF is a very typical format for using an indexed color palette. So GIF allows you to reduce your file size by choosing exactly the amount of colors you want. You can make a GIF that only has 3 colors or 10. And since it doesn't have to store the whole 3 times 8-bit values, but just maybe one 8-bit value for storing your 256 different colors instead of a few millions, you save space. It gets smaller. So if you want to make a web page that is very lightweight, you can just use the amount of colors that are available to your drawing space. So instead of using the whole rainbow like here, I can tell it to just use a bunch of colors that I can define by myself. Let's say you do a web design and you already know, oh, I'm only going to work with 4 different colors. This would be a place where you could decide to reduce the number of colors. I can use a web-optimized palette. So if you're working on, like nowadays you can use any RGB values, but at some points you couldn't use any color. You could just use like a cross-section of the rainbow. So this would be the web-optimized palette. And I could also reduce it to just black and white. So the pixel is not 3 times 8-bit, but it's just a 1-bit value. So it's either black or white. So this saves you a lot of space. And I could also use my custom palette where I could just click and say, I want this one or another one. Or you could make your own one that only has 3 colors. Yeah, this is just for giving you some background information on why we have all those features with palettes and index colors. Okay, so we know how to zoom, command mouse wheel, we know how to pan. Now we have to learn how to select. And selection tools are something very important in bitmap programs. So if you want to select a bunch of pixels, there's maybe 10 different ways of doing it. The easiest way is taking the rectangular selection tool. So I draw a rectangle. I can resize it the way I want to. If I go to the tool options, I can see exactly the position and the size. So maybe I wanted to start in the top left corner. So the origin of our document is in the top left corner. And so I could say I want one that is 600 by 300 pixels wide. I can also move the selection around just by dragging it, and it will keep the size that I chose. I can round the corners, I could feather the edges, which I will still explain in a moment. And once I hit enter, it accepts the selection. So now it's fixed, I can't move it anymore. And it shows like a little ant line that walks around my selection. And now there's several things we can do with selections. We can copy selections, we can move them around, we can draw inside the selection, or we can invert the selection so that it only draws outside of the area where we're in. So maybe just for the fun of it, let's take a brush and start painting over our image. And you will see that it only paints inside the selection. Maybe I take another color that is a bit more visible. So by selecting something, I can limit the area which gets affected by my drawing tools. And I can also, for example, copy a selection. And for this, I want you to go to the Layers menu so that we see what actually happened. And I hit Command C or Control C on Windows and Control V, and you will see that there's a floating selection appearing here. The floating selection is something special in GIMP that Photoshop doesn't have. But instead of just making a new layer where our selection is in, it makes a selection that we can still move around and do some special tricks to them before we actually drop it. And for dropping it, we have to hit the New Layer button. It looks like a white page, and it's at the bottom of the layer menu. So once I hit the New Layer button, I get a new layer, which is just the selection. And once I have the second layer, I can, for example, use the Move tool, which is shortcut M, and can move it around. Do I have to explain the layer thing? I think it's quite easy. No, it's like as if you were working on transparent paper, and you put one transparent paper on top of each other, and you can decide on which one you paint. And if you look from top down, you see all the different layers as if they were stacked on each other. And since they have some transparency, you can see the lower layers below the upper layer. And if you want to reduce your drawing to a single layer file again, you right-click on one of the layers, and you either say Merge Visible Layers or you say Flatten Image. I will do Merge Visible Layers, and I say Merge, and I have a single layer again. So if I wanted to cut a layer, I would, let's take another selection tool, in this case the Ellipse tool. The Ellipse tool works as an ellipse, but if I hit Command while I'm doing it, no, actually Shift, I can make a perfectly circular selection. So if I hit Shift and I move my mouse, it will keep circular. If I release Shift, it will make it an ellipse. So once I hit Enter, I have another selection. Okay, so now I have a circular selection, and this time, instead of copying it, I will cut it. So I hit Command X, Command V, and I make a new layer. And now if I move my layer, I will see a hole appearing in the other layer. Okay, this is getting boring. Let's do something more fun. Or maybe just for the sake of it, we explain a few of the other tools. So there's a tool that I can use for scaling. So I could scale my layer. Pay attention to this little sign here. This allows us to change between a proportional and a non-proportional scale. If you have this one open, you can change the width independent of the height. If you have it closed, it always changes proportional. And then there's more tools for like shearing your selection and for giving it some perspective. Oh yeah, if you click here on scale, then there's a little chain symbol here. Can you see this one right between the two numbers? This one here, now it's open and now it's closed. If I open it, I can make it 2000 pixels wide or not. But it will keep the same height. So it stretches the image horizontally. If I click the symbol, it will adjust the lower value in the same way, so it keeps the same proportion. So if I want to rotate something, I click, and then I can give it a rotation angle. Yeah, you have to do it in more than one step, but well, I think you can live with that. Okay, then there's another selection tool, which is the lasso tool, which allows us to just draw a funny line, and wherever it intersects, it makes a selection. And one important command is how to get rid of the selection, which is select and then none, which is Shift Control A. I don't know why it's not Shift Command A. It should show me this command here somewhere. Select. Well, I have the feeling that here's something missing on my screen, but believe me and get used to the shortcut. It's Shift Command A on Mac, and it's probably Shift Control A on Windows. Yeah. So whichever selection tool you're using, if you want to get rid of the selection, you hit Shift Command A. Then we also have the magic wand, and the magic wand will select based on the color that you're clicking on. So if I click on the yellow piece, it will select all the yellow here. But there's one important thing to know about the magic wand, which is the threshold. So right now I have a threshold of 100. And if I increase the threshold, actually, this is very annoying on Mac. Well, now it will select everything, or it will select everything in my current layer. If I decrease it a little bit, oh, come on. It will select the yellow and the other shade of yellow that is very close to it. So by reducing it, if I put the threshold on 0, it will only select the pixels that have exactly the same color as the pixel you click on. If you increase it, it will spread out to colors that are further away from our selection. And then we have the select by color. And the selection tools always work in the layer that you're actually in. So if I go to the layer menu and I switch to another layer, and I want to get rid of all the white color in this layer, I would use the selection by color. And now it should have selected everything that is white. And if I hit delete, it will turn everything transparent that used to be white before. And same thing than before. If I change the threshold of the tool, I can limit how far it goes towards the selection. So if I go very close, I see that there are some pixels that are not perfectly white and not perfectly yellow. Yeah? So if I have a threshold of 0, and I click on the white, so now you can see it only takes everything that is perfectly pure white. As soon as I have some other colors in there, it won't select it. But once I increase the threshold, it will go further towards some other colors. I put a bit more, goes a bit further yet, and a bit more. So it will slowly advance to other values. And if I want to copy a selection into another picture, that used to have a white background, and I want to copy it into a picture that has a black background. I want to make sure that I get rid of all the white pixels in this transition. So you want a threshold that is quite big. But there's also other tricks that I will show you in a second of how I can avoid copying some white pixels if I just want the yellow. Okay, so there's one question asking about like how to change the arrangement of the windows. And actually, all of the tabs, you can just grab them and move them somewhere else. And they will pop up in their own little window. And if you hit this little button, you can add tabs to it. So let's say I want the tool options in here as well. And I want the layers in here as well. Then I get those tabs on top where I can change the way they look. And there must be some way of docking this into the regular menu. And I think it's either Control or Shift. I forgot the shortcut. I can also resort them. You see, if I move this one over here, it adds the tab to the other one. And there should be also some way of making it as a completely new layer. You can choose from the dockable dialog, so it will open the one for you that you selected. Yeah, I will just go around and see how the GIMP shows you the boundaries of your layer. So if you go to View, then there's an option that says Show Layer Boundary. If you turn this on, it makes a little ant line with yellow for showing the boundary of your layer. And if I turn it off, it looks the same way that it would look in Photoshop. You can turn this off in the preferences so it will never appear again. So one thing we will do a lot is take pictures and put them on our website. Maybe I will just take a short screenshot of something and explain how to edit this in order to get a nice picture for the website. For some reason, it kind of became, how do you say, tradition to use to go to Google image search and search for family. So if you right-click on the image and you say copy image, it will copy the image to your clipboard. So there's no need to go and save image as and put it on a folder and go back and forth. You can just right-click, copy image, switch to GIMP, and then you say File, Create. Like it's Shift Command V. I don't know why some of my, I know the shortcut, but I don't know the menu. Shift Command V, and it will make a new image with the size of my clipboard. But this is not exactly what I wanted, so I will go on View Image. So I see the whole resolution, and I do copy image again. And now I will actually search until I find the menu entry. But it should be Create from Clipboard, which doesn't exist here. Am I blind, or I think it's hiding some of my stuff. But you should either have File New from Clipboard or File Create from Clipboard, or Shift Command V. So let's say we want to get rid of the background. How would we do this? Select it with the magic wand. Okay, so we take the magic wand and we click on the white. And nothing happens, probably because we have the threshold very low. Oh no, it does. But now our threshold was too high. So it takes anything that is slightly white and includes it into the selection. So I lower the threshold. And now I get everything that is purely white. But if I look very close, I can see that the selection is not the way I, because there's still a lot of mostly white pixels just very close to my outline. So I increase the threshold a little bit, and I click again, and I get to something that is fairly all right for what you want to do. And if I hit delete now, it will delete the background and make it transparent. And actually, there's a little trick. So since right at the corner we have some pixels that are white, that are a mixture of white and the colors that we have, I would like to kind of get rid of this white stuff in there. Because if I would paste this on a black background, I would see a white outline around it. So one way would be to increase the threshold a little bit, so it takes more of the white pixels. Another way is to go to Select, Feather, and I feather my selection by, let's say, 5 pixels. This depends on the size of your canvas. Like if you have a picture in 4K that is huge, for getting the same feathering, you would want more pixels than you would want for a very small picture. So if I look closer, so I go closer, and I hit the delete button again, and what I would expect to happen is that some of the white gets eliminated. And this is exactly what happened. But you can tell that my selection still looks kind of edgy. I didn't see any change in the shape of the selection. But this is because that the AND line can just show selected or not selected, but it can't show the transition. If I click on this button in the bottom left corner, you can see there's a little, it's down here. Yeah. So it shows me, it highlights the selection in a color. So if I click this one, suddenly my selection, or actually the stuff that is not selected, will turn red. And here in the red, I can see that the red is not completely opaque everywhere. But it has a slight transition. It goes from dark red to fading out red. And this is the way I can tell that my selection is fuzzy, it's feathered. And I could also go and edit this color with any of my brushes. So if I take a brush and I start brushing, and I start brushing in here, I will add this to the selection. So if I switch back to the normal mode, I would see that my selection increased by the part that I painted. And you can also use all the image filters and all the different tools for manipulating pixels, for manipulating your selection. I will go one step back, or actually 2. So I'm back to my normal selection. And I will switch back to the normal view. So this is just for you to know that there's, you can make your selection by using one of the selection tools, or you can switch into this mode and then use all of your drawing tools for defining a selection. Okay, so I remove the selection with Shift Command A, and I will search for another picture. Let's say I want a landscape. So I will just take the first picture that comes up. You can choose any one you want. This one is quite big. And again, right-click, copy image. Go to GIMP, Shift Command V, and I get a new picture with this background. And if I go to my other picture and I hit Command A for selecting everything, it's the same as going to select all. And then I go to Edit, Copy, and switch to my other picture and go to Edit, Paste. I can put my family onto this new background. And I will remove the selection. And right now, as always, this is a floating selection first. So I have to click on the new layer button in order to drop the picture where it is right now. And now, since we did the trick with the feather, I can go quite close. I can see that there's a slight, it's not a perfect match, but it's more or less okay. So this is the way you could take all of the Fabacademy students and take a photo on a white background and transform them to a collection of a collage to whatever style you like. And then there's another thing that I want to show you. So I go to this little menu, which is the paths menu. And paths are something that has nothing to do with the pixel. It's a concept that I will explain as soon as we're in Inkscape. But I can convert any selection into a path. very handy for many of the things you do. So if I click on this button here, it says selection to path. Now I see that I have a little path here. And right now I don't see it. I have to click on the little icon here first. Maybe if I remove my selection, you can tell that now there's a red line going all around my selection, even here on the outside. And so this is a so-called Bézier's line, the usual way of doing it. Okay, so once we have our path, we can edit it with the path tool. And now, do you see this little tool? It's the third one in the second row. This is the path editing tool. And with the path editing tool, if I click on a path, it shows me all the little buttons, all the little points it goes through, and I can move it around. So I'm free to edit the path whatever way I want to. Also have those little handles. So if you want to make a selection very precisely and also save it so that you can recall it in the future, I would recommend you to convert it to a path. Because once we have a path, we can convert the path to a selection by clicking on this one. So now my path is still there. I can hide it. And I have a selection, or I had a selection. Let's click it again. Ah, there it is. So now I have a selection, and if I, let's say I fill everything in black or in white, it will fill everything apart from my selection. Or it will fill my selection and leave everything that is not selected. So many times when you, let's say you have a picture where the hair of somebody is completely crazy, and for example here it didn't really get into this hole, so I could either use the selection tools, and in combination with Shift, Control, and Command, I can decide if it adds to the selection or subtracts from the selection. So I deselect everything again. And so the way we did the last selection was by using, let's use another tool just for a change. So I take the scissor tool, and the scissor tool allows me to click on several, and it will try to find a path in between them that kind of goes between two colors, between different colors. So if I go all the way back to the first one and then double click, I get a closed selection. And now I can go to the path menu and say selection to path. Can you see? Okay, so make it a path again. And I click on the little icon for seeing the path. I can edit the path. And I can convert it back to a selection. And this way you have a lot of control over what exactly you select. And if you're still not happy, you can use the highlight tool and really go in there with a brush or with a razor and really just select the pieces that you want. And I think this is enough about selection for the moment. So this will teach you how to assemble several images, know how to get rid of parts of the selection that you don't want, how to copy them on top of each other, and how to combine them back to one single image. I will deselect everything, Shift Command A, and I will go to the Layers menu, and I go to Image, Scale Image. So what I see in Scale Image is the width and the height in pixels. And this is all that is necessary for completely defining the size of my image. If I know the size in pixels, and I know how many colors there are in the pixel, I know the file size. What you see below, the X resolution and Y resolution, this is instructions for a printer or for a display of how big it is. If I increase the resolution, it's going to be smaller on the print. If I If I decrease the resolution, it's going to be bigger in the screen. By the way, you can have pixels, you can have bitmaps that have more than 3 times 8-bit color. Then we talk about so-called HDRI, high dynamic range imagery, and they can have 16-bit for each channel or even 32 bits. So you could capture colors that are impossible to print or to show on a screen. Our eye has a very high dynamic range. If you look into the sun, there's a vast amount of light coming your way, and if you cover your eyes, it's very dark. A screen can't do this. Actually, the pictures, or the oldest pictures that have a high dynamic range, are the colored windows in the churches. You know, when there's like a beautiful glass window with different colors, this has a high dynamic range, and there's no way you can photograph this because normal cameras don't have the dynamics for capturing this. So what you would do is you take several pictures with different exposure times, then you can combine them to one image that has a high dynamic range, but you can't look at it on a screen because the screen can show it. But you know that the information is in there. So if you use it, for example, for 3D rendering, you can have reflections and other atmospherical effects that take benefit of this high dynamic range, even though you can see it on screen. Okay, so what we're interested, if we talk about image size, is the amount of pixels, the amount of colors we have. The less colors we put, if I go to grayscale or index colors, the image gets smaller. The DPIs are just our scaling factor if we want to apply it to a milling machine or to a printer or to a display. Because actually most displays have a resolution, or used to have a resolution of 72 DPI. Nowadays with the retina displays, it's getting a lot higher. So you have displays with 300 DPI or more. So, but in theory, if you know the resolution of your monitor, you can tell how big the image is going to be just by knowing the amount of pixels and the DPI. So we're back on track, back to Inkscape. So as I said, you can edit the colors of the whole image, or you can edit the colors of the current layer. But let's just go to colors. So if you want to turn, let's say you want to engrave this picture with a laser onto a piece of paper. What the laser will do, it will look at the grayscale of your image, and the darker it is, the more power it will use for engraving. So first thing we do is we get rid of all the color, and there's two ways of doing this. The easiest one is to say desaturate. So desaturating an image will reduce it to a grayscale, but I can still paint with colors because we're still in an RGB image space. Can you see? So there's no colors, but my image mode is still RGB. If I switch to grayscale, it will reduce everything to black and white, and I won't be able to paint in color. So whenever you're trying to paint and it doesn't show any color, it's because your image is in grayscale mode. And now I don't know how to get back. Well, never mind, for the moment we're working in grayscale. And the problem is that the laser, when it engraves, it might be so strong that even the slight gray of the faces is already dark enough so that it just leaves an equally burned surface, which is not what we want. We want to see some color differences. So we go to colors, and in the easiest case, brightness and contrast. And I would generally increase brightness and contrast. So I get an image that would be easier to engrave with a laser. Another way of doing it is with the levels. Sorry, no, I want to edit it as curves. But if you go to levels, you can see the whole color spectrum of your image, and I see that there's very little pure white. And then there's equal distribution of the other colors. Let's say I want to get rid of those colors, so I can just move the slider a little bit down, and it will clip everything that is slightly grayish to a pure white. So this color, I could actually change the color of this one. If I knew how, with this one. Now I added another point. So I can map the colors that you have to the colors that I want to have. So if I just want to get rid of everything that is not pure white, I move the right slider to the left, and it will make everything pure white that is over this threshold. And the same for the black. So if I move this one further to the right, everything will gradually become more and more black. I can do the same thing with the curves. So if I cancel and go to colors, curves, it's more visible. This is the colors that come in. This is the colors that come out. So if I want to clip everything that is not perfectly white, I make a little kink in here. No, actually in the other way. Oh no, it was right, like this. So now everything that is kind of whitish goes to perfect white. And if I want everything that is slightly black to be dark black, I kink this one in the other direction. And now I enhance the dark color. Generally, this is just as the same thing as doing the brightness and contrast. Brightness and contrast brightness is moving the thing left and right, whereas the contrast is kinking it so that it fits part of the white and part of the black. And normally, if I want to engrave something with a laser, I make myself lots of little fields, where the first one is completely black, and the last one is completely white, and in between I have all the color grades in between, and I engrave this on my material, and depending on the material, they behave different. So maybe on acrylic with 20% gray, it still makes a nice white engraving, whereas on wood, I don't see anything. Some wood actually get lighter if you engrave them, and some get lighter up to a certain point, and then they get darker. And it's a good idea to just test it, and then you could apply this color palette to your pictures. There's also a way, and I think it's called posterize. So I can choose a range of colors that I want to be in, and I could select all of those colors with the color select by color, and exactly select which amount of gray I want in there so that my engraving looks like. There's just a few tricks for engraving with the laser. You can also use the laser engraving for generating stamps, for example. And if you send an engraving that is only black and white, it will have vertical flanks on the stamp. But if I want something that is kind of a little bit beveled, so that my stamp holds for a longer time, I would give it a transition from black to white around my letters, let's say. And this way I can do a 3D pattern by engraving. You put a lot of power on the laser, you can kind of engrave three-dimensional shapes. The only thing that you can't really control is how deep it will engrave. Depends on the homogeneity of your material and of the properties of your material. Some materials will start burning before you get to the result that you want, where others, they will just melt and make a green mess. So this is about experimenting. Okay, then another thing, well, obviously you can crop an image. This is this little tool. And I can just select a part of the image that I want to keep. And as soon as I hit enter, it will crop it to the size. Then maybe if you have some little, let's say I want to get rid of this little dimple, I would use the healing brush. This is the same then in Photoshop. So I hit Alt and I click on a spot that I want to sample, and then I click on the spot that I want to heal. No, actually it's Control. No, Shift. Is it? Command, sorry. Command. I click on the spot that I want to sample, and then I click on the spot that I want to get rid of. And this is what I'm left with. So maybe if your camera has like some dust on the lens and you want to get rid of all the little speckles that it leaves, you would use the healing brush. Then there's tools like the stamp tool. So if you want this lady to have another eye, you could do the command click again, and then wherever I click, it will draw eyes, which is kind of spooky. I could also tell it to rotate or distribute those in a different way. I could feather them, or maybe let's get rid of this creepy image. Of course, you have all kinds of different brushes that also work for the stamp tool. So I could like sample my eye and have it in like a funny manner. Of course, one thing, if we have a selection, we can fill it with the bucket tool. But the bucket tool also has a threshold. Same than the magic wand, or same than the select by color. So if I take the threshold very high up, it will paint more of the area. Maybe I should change back to RGB. Doesn't let me. I lost my RGB, damn it. Maybe I take this one. So I do a selection. Actually, I will merge all my layers. I make a selection. Actually, there's a background removal tool. This is also interesting. It's not very perfect, but it's kind of okay. So what you do first is you roughly outline the object that you want to get cut out. And now I paint on the object that I want to extract. So it will take track of all the colors that I'm going over. And once I hit enter, a selection that is quite bad. I should have done this in a different way. Let me see if the tool options help me a little bit. Yeah, so I mark the foreground. I remove the selection and I try again. So this is kind of my rough outline. And then I paint on the stuff that I want to keep. Oh, this was not good. But you get the idea. If you play with it a little bit, you might get some results that are nicer than mine. Oh yeah, no, actually I wanted to have a selection in order to show the bucket tool. So the bucket tool, I can either work with a threshold, or I can tell it to fill the whole selection. So if I select this one and I click into the selection, it will fill the whole selection with my foreground color. So you have to click on this one. It's not the bucket tool, but it's the blend tool. And then there's a blur tool, which is sometimes nice. Let's say you have an image, and let's say I want to remove this lady here. So I just make a very bad selection like this, and I delete her. And now I want to take the paint tool for painting in the stuff that is missing. Maybe also want some of the green. Actually, I could just, yeah, but it's just for you to get the idea. Maybe I should take a bigger brush, but this takes ages. Okay, and so now I see that I have some stuff in there that I want to get rid of. So I could use the blur tool and just blur the whole thing, and it will kind of hide the fact that I did a very bad job. So whatever, like blurring is nice for hiding stuff that's not so good. And then there's a tool which is the smudge tool. Actually, yeah. The smudging lets me like wiggle around in the paint as if it was like wet paint and I'm moving with a finger in it. And then there's the dodge and burn. And dodge and burn does two things. In one mode, it makes it darker, and in one mode, it makes it lighter. It's just the same as applying a filter, but only to the parts where you draw. So let's say I want, I see that maybe the teeth are not perfectly white. So I can just go here, and I have to check if my tool by default is in darkening or in lightening mode. And since I keep forgetting, so now it's in dodging mode. So wherever I click, it will make it lighter. I make my brush a bit smaller. Maybe I have to remove a selection. Yeah, okay, this was it. I had something selected somewhere. So this is why it didn't work. And now I can take this one down again. And now, well, you see that this is really making everything lighter that I touch. If you reduce the opacity, you can do it in a more subtle way. And if I want to make something darker, I hit the Command key and I just go over it. Makes it a bit darker. Okay. Anything else you need to know? GIMP does not have the layer mask that Photoshop has. No, the adjustment layers, which is something very nice in Photoshop. We don't have adjustment layers, but we have layer masks. So if I have a selection, I can copy it, and I can right-click on this and say layer mask. And I can choose my selection as the layer mask. And this will mask everything out apart from the thing that I have selected. I can double-click on, whoops, no, I think I have to Command-click on my layer mask for turning it on and off. And I think if I Alt-click on it, I can use the normal painting tools for adjusting my masking layer. So if I erase, I have to make it white. Come on, this should work. Yeah. So if I do it like this, and I Command click on this one again. What? Yeah. So now I have the mask expanded, and I just see this part. This is very nice because you don't have to throw away the rest of your image. You just keep it, and you can turn it on and off. Or you can edit it. So if I have an image and I just want part of it, I do a layer mask. I can edit my layer mask as a separate image. And if I change my mind at some point, I can go edit the layer mask, and I still have the possibility to edit my original image. Yeah, so maybe let's just do a quick how to get from this to an HTML. So I have my, let's say I wanna make a screenshot. So on Windows, I would recommend you the snipping tool. If you hit Windows key and hit snip, but you can also define a shortcut. In Windows, if you right-click on an icon and say Properties, there's a point where you can define a shortcut. And I would really recommend you to define a shortcut in Windows for your snipping tool. So you just hit, let's say, Shift-Control F10, and you can take a screenshot. What always works on all computers is the print key. So if you hit the print key, it takes a screenshot, and it saves it in your clipboard. So if you go to GIMP, you can just paste it. If you hold Alt while you're hitting the print key, it only takes a screenshot of the current active window. And on Macintosh, I have to hit Command 4 for doing the same. Then I could paste it as a new image. So on Macintosh, if I want to take a screenshot and have it copied to my clipboard automatically, I have to hold Shift, Control, Command 4. So this gives me a screenshot. It does not end up on my desktop. You see? Clean. And Shift Command V, and I get my image that I just took a screenshot of. Shift Control Command 4. So easy. And once I have the screenshot, I can go and change its size. So I would recommend you to make your images more or less 900 pixels wide. If you want something bigger, I think you should have all received an email from me with some tutorials, some tips and tricks. Have you seen this? So I changed the size to 900 pixels wide, and I make sure that I have this little icon selected so that it keeps the aspect ratio. I say scale. If you want to change the zoom, you could either hit Command and rotate the mouse wheel. If you want to see it in 1:1, the same size that it will appear on your website, you hit the 1 key. This is the size I'm going to get. You can also use the other buttons for getting other zoom levels, but 1 just gives you the 100%. And then I go to File, Export As. You could either go through the trouble of selecting a format here, or you just leave it like this, and you give it a file extension that is the right one, and GIMP will automatically recognize, oh, if you call it image.png, let's save it as a PNG. If you call it image JPEG, it's supposed to be a JPEG. So I call this one .jpeg, and I export it to my desktop. And I leave this at 90%. I don't want you to put anything higher than 90. This doesn't make any sense. Okay? And yeah, you already know how to integrate this into your website. So in my GIMP, I have the batch image manipulation. If you don't have this, you would have to search for BIMP. BIMP, which takes you to the batch image manipulation plugin for GIMP. And since on Linux and Windows you already have it integrated, you only need this for Windows. And if you click on this link, it takes you to a page where you can download an installer for Windows. And I highly recommend this to you. Ah yeah, and another little thing, like if you, let's say you have something made and you want an arrow pointing to it. Like, here, this is the place where you should do it. Actually, I would recommend you to do this in Inkscape. Yeah, let's do this in Inkscape. But just for showing you, if you draw a path in Inkscape, in GIMP, you can tell it to stroke with the color. So if I click on this one, paint along the path, I can stroke it with the current brush that I have selected. Maybe I make it red so you can actually see it. Okay, so this would be the way that you give color to your path and transform them into a bitmap. I know I didn't show the batch tool yet, but maybe I'll give it a quick go. So I look for a bunch of pictures. Anybody volunteers? I'll just take some site and some media. Yeah, this looks good. So it's 20. So I go to File, Batch Image Manipulation. I add images, or I can add a whole folder. I take this folder, and it takes me all the images that are in there. And now I can select what to do with them. So I could resize all of them, crop, flip, color correction, all kinds of stuff. You can also create your own set of rules to apply to this image. What we want to do most of the time is resizing and changing the format and compression. So if you have a whole folder full of PNGs and you want them to be JPEGs, you would go to change format and compression. And I say, now I do it the other way around. I want them to be all PNGs. And I can set the compression for all of them. And I say, OK. And output folder, you have two options. If you choose the same folder, it will overwrite all your images. In this case, I don't want to overwrite somebody's images. So I just make a new folder on my desktop, call it test. And this is where I put all the images. And you can ask it to alert you when you're overwriting them or not. You can also tell it to rename them and give them numbers and all kinds of things. And if I hit apply, it just goes, well, yeah, okay, this was fast. So now if I go to my desktop and I go to the test folder, I see that I have a whole bunch of PNGs in there that are all, that used to be all JPEGs. I would recommend you, if you work with a digital camera, to take the cameras, the pictures from your camera and just batch resize them to 900 pixels wide. And then you can, or actually what you should do is you go through your images, you select the images that you want to keep, you put them in a folder. Then you go through them and you crop them so that they only show the part that you really want to see. And then you save them all, and then you batch resize them to a small size. And then you can use a trick on the command line for generating the HTML. You do the, on Macintosh, I would do the list command and type this to the clipboard. The same thing we did on the first day for copying our license file. But this way I can have a long list of images. I copy them to the clipboard. I copy them to my HTML editor. I add the image tags, and in an instant you have many, many images on your website.